move the motion.
I move the motion. 10 minutes, is it?
10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Corla. Minister, first of all, I'd like to thank those in our office, Breen, O'Donnell and Mairead and McGrath, for putting together this motion for us. I am delighted to be part of the Rural Independent Group putting forward this motion today on behalf of every inshore fisherman, both in West Cork and throughout the country. A motion, I may add, just for the inshore fishermen, which only for the Rural Independent Group would never get a mention here in the Dáil. The Irish inshore fleet comprises of approximately 91% of all our fishing vessels, Minister, and supports between 2,500 to 3,000 jobs in rural coastal communities. Similar to those in the bigger fleet, these inshore fishermen have their livelihoods go mainly unaided, and sadly, more and more inshore fishermen are leaving the sea, a place of their employment. Storm after storm strikes our shoreline year after year, but sadly, even that many a fisherman could prove massive damage or losses, a refusal here in the Dáil meant they got no aid for the inshore men to replace his lost gear after my many calls. Many of the inshore fishermen I know of in West Cork fish for shrimp. These inshore fishermen's incomes have been severely affected with the collapse of the processed shrimp and velvet crab market, which impacts many inshore fishermen. And today, Minister, we back the call for a 12 million direct state financial package. Unless you have met with the National Inshore Fishermen's Association before Christmas, they have laid the crisis bare, and aid is now required, and this motion calls on this to be agreed. If you and this government are only feeding fib stories to the inshore sector, be honest enough and vote against our motion. As I make it clear once more, 12 million compensation are many of these decent people will be going out of business. If this emergency fund is not announced today, let me tell every inshore fisherman or woman, you have been conned by this government. This will not be setting a precedence, Minister. You rightly aided the pig sector to the tune of millions last year to rescue their business, which was in a similar crisis. We also need to look at a fuel subsidy for inshore fishermen. They have to spend hugely on fuel for their inshore boats, especially as it's petrol they use, and large amounts. There was a fund through Europe, Minister, that other countries applied for their fishermen, but you refused to apply this to Ireland, which I presume the reason for same is you would not get permission from the Greens to help our fishermen. It is intolerable that funds allocated by the EU Commission have not been apportioned to our inshore fleet, while other EU countries draw from these funds in the form of fuel subsidies to their respective inshore fleets. I will be listening, Minister, with great interest to what you planned to aid these hard-working men and women, and while this 12 million won't be the greatest solution, it will help in some way for fishermen to adjust to prepare themselves going forward. It is completely unacceptable for the Minister for Marine and the Government to ignore the genuine astronomical pressures on the fishermen. In fact, the lack of any financial support for this unique sector could be called cruel, particularly as up to 3,000 jobs are now in jeopardy in rural coastal communities. Our motion today also instructs the Government to urgently grant the inshore fishery fleet a greater quota allocation with diversification to the other species, and this quota need not come from quotas to our Irish larger fleet. It can come from the quotas given all over the world to other countries of Irish fish out of Irish waters. It is very often that I blame the Greens for much of the difficulty rural Ireland finds itself in. But when it comes to fisheries, it is Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have destroyed the fishing industry in this country, as year after year, decade after decade, they shut a blind eye to every quota we could obtain and sadly handed away the quotas that we had on our own waters. It is wrong that in this Dáil I hear deputies either favour the inshore sector, the smaller man, or the larger fishing fleet, the so-called bigger guy. We should unite and fight as one, as it suits the Irish government to have them fight apart like the old British way, divide and conquer. In negotiations with Micheál Martin and Leo Varadkar for the formation of the government in 2020, I had two red liners if I was to support this government. One, no downgrading of Bantry Hospital, and we all see why I did not get that granted. And the other was a dedicated Minister for Fisheries, which was denied to me, or our country. Not even would a super junior or junior be offered. Even the Taoiseach at the time, Micheál Martin, asked me, where do you think, Deputy, will we find the ministries? Which one will we drop if you're to get your request? But hey presto, when it's suited to keep the nod and wink politics going, he parachutes two super juniors to keep the boys or girls happy. But of course, none of them our fisheries. Minister McConnell must think I'm here having a go at him personally, but I'm not. I didn't ask who was to be the Minister for Fisheries, just a stand-alone Minister for Fisheries, solely responsible for the inshore fishing and larger fleet. This request was point-blankly refused, and we now see the consequences of the actions of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, who have proven to be totally against the fishing sector down through the years. We have a massive, rich resource surrounding our country, and Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, bit by bit, have handed it away to the foreign fleets. You have funded improvements to Piers Minister, which must be welcomed. But do you realise what the fishermen have said to me recently about the funding of Piers? They said it's no longer for fishermen, because we're finished. These improvements are going to be for everybody else but us. And while I mention funds, what about the funds required for Union Hall Pier? This is vital, and both you, Minister, and the Din Taoiseach Micheál Martin raised all the locals' hopes in Union Hall and Glendore when you were on a damage limitation visit to West Cork after the shocking Brexit deal. But you forgot to bring the chequebook, leaving locals angered and dismayed that much-needed works at Union Hall Pier stay undone. For those fishermen in West Cork who are fighting on, we do need the Baltimore Breakwater Works in Baltimore to come in. I was talking to Independent Councillor Karen Coakley yesterday, who told me that this can be done and that the SAC can be moved for such cases, which she is fighting through the Cork County Council to have done. I urge you to sit up, Minister, and take note of this, as this works is urgently required for the fishermen of Baltimore. I want also to congratulate the people of Cork McSherry and beyond who are kindly donated a top-of-the-range lifeboat, which I had the pleasure to be with all the locals at the pier on Sunday, welcoming this state-of-the-art boat, which will help save lives at sea in the years to come. A huge thank you to all concerned and to the volunteers who put their lives at risk to help others on the lifeboat. And this is what happens, Minister. When every inshore fisherman or woman goes to sea, they put their lives at risk to bring food to our table, to feed their families, having to go out in all weathers, and then this work stops. These inshore men have trained all their lives to be masters of the sea, but genuinely did not train for any other profession. In the rural places I represent, the Crookhavens, the Goleens, the Skull, Bella, the Hob, Bantry, Glengarriff, Adrigole, Castletownbere, Union Hall, Baltimore, and further east, out all the way to Kinsale. I could go on and on. The livelihoods of these people is at risk. They will need time to adjust, and you, Minister, I hope, will recognise this today and give the 12 million aid that's been called for. I was brought up to respect fishermen by my mother, who gave us a serious warning always, for some reason, even though she had no fishing background, to respect the fishermen. This is why I always call for their very survival. And I will now call on rank and file mind change in your department, Minister, towards fishermen. A rank and file change within the SFPA towards fishermen, Irish fishermen. If this won't change, you will wipe out both sectors. Prior to Christmas, Minister, I was contacted by a fishing vessel off of Castletownbere who was being continuously surrounded by a foreign vessel. This has happened where there was a near ramming incident last year, and in previous years where a person's life was lost because of the carry-on that's being carried out there. Now, I brought this before the Ag Marine Committee I think, for us to sit up and see who is responsible. The SFPA don't seem to want to respond. The department don't want to respond. The Taoiseach doesn't want to respond. It's an astonishing situation to think that Irish fishing vessels who can prove by video they're being circled, surrounded by foreign vessels off our waters, and they have no protection whatsoever. No, if there's an infringement by an Irish vessel, there'll be no problem. They'll be surrounded and brought in ashore to Irish waters to face prosecution. But when it comes to saving their lives, there's nobody out there to help them. And Minister, this will have to be clarified as to who has rights and how can Irish fishermen be protected in waters when they go to fish, which is their true entitlement. Minister, as I said earlier on, I sincerely hope you back this motion, but back this motion on one basis, that there's €12 million going to be allocated to the inshore sector, and that there's going to be a fuel subsidy given to the inshore sector immediately. If you get up here today and support this motion and don't give either of those requests that these inshore fishermen have asked, you're only calling them. And you won't fool us, and you certainly won't fool the public out there. I will be, as I said, listening with great intent to your speech in the next to see what have you in store for inshore fishermen in this country. Thank you.